Have you ever wondered what actions could cause your soul to fall into the hands of demons? In today's video, we will delve into the story of the 7 deadly sins, dangerous temptations that could lead you down a path of no return. Be careful, because sometimes just one wrong step is enough to trade away your soul. I have always disliked hospitals, detesting the sharp, pungent smell of medicine that greets you the moment you step inside. However, since Rose was injured while saving me, I couldn't just pretend it had nothing to do with me. That evening, after my shift ended, I rushed to the hospital. Glancing at the clock, it was already close to 9 p.m. Rose's room was on the 6th floor. Pushing the door open, I saw Lily already there, peeling an apple for Rose. As soon as I stepped in, Rose noticed me and waved me over to sit. She had money, so she stayed in a private room. In truth, her leg injury wasn't severe, but she had lost a lot of blood. Although she insisted on being discharged, Lily and I wanted her to stay a few more days. This is so boring. For someone like me, being stuck in a hospital is no different from being in prison, Rose sighed, taking the apple and biting into it. Lily chuckled softly, rinsing the knife under the tap. The doctor said you could leave in a few days. But you were really something. Running such a long distance with your leg bleeding like that, Lily said. I looked at Rose, feeling a bit embarrassed. You really went through a lot for me. If it weren't for you, I'd probably be dead by now. Lily glanced at me, her expression carrying a hint of reproach. If you two enjoy taking risks so much, I wonder how many lives you think you have to spare. Outside the window, heavy rain poured down noisily. I've always hated rainy days because many people say rain is the regretful tears of the dead who are unwilling to leave this world. Rose propped herself up against the pillow and sat upright. Since you're both here, I might as well tell you a story. Hearing the mention of a story, I immediately sat down, curious. Lily put on her coat and sat beside me, both of us gathering around Rose. Gluttony, greed, sloth, pride, lust, wrath, and envy. These are the 7 deadly sins of humanity in Christian doctrine. Moreover, each sin corresponds to a demon, which exists by feeding on the dark side of human nature. In other words, if someone indulges in any of these sins, the demon will appear. In the East, there's actually a similar legend. It's said that on the first Thursday of August, after 10 p.m., 7 figures will appear at a crossroads. They resemble blind people, with each one placing their left hand on the shoulder of the person in front, led by the first figure. They all wear identical clothing, tattered black raincoats, conical hats, and no shoes. In their right hand, they carry lanterns, and the one leading the group holds a bamboo staff. It's said that no one has ever truly seen them, because anyone who does and has committed any of the 7 sins will be taken by them to serve as a replacement. From then on, they will wander the earth endlessly until they can find the next person to take their place. That day, I walked alone in the darkness. Sometimes I enjoy taking nighttime strolls. It allows me to avoid crowds, perhaps because I've always disliked noise and commotion. I was aware of the legend of the 7 figures. That day happened to be the first Thursday of August. Initially, the weather was fine, but then a strange, heavy rain began to pour. By then, I had already reached the outskirts, where the roads were deserted. At first, there were 1 or 2 streetlights, but eventually I couldn't see anything at all. Being someone who hates retracing my steps, I had no choice but to press on, looking for shelter while avoiding the rain. In the distance, I saw a faint light. Clinging to a sliver of hope, I decided to knock on the door. If I had known that this knock would nearly cost me my life, I would have gladly stayed out in the rain all night. The door was opened by a middle-aged man. He was tall, towering over me by a significant margin. You know, I'm not exactly short, and among average people, I'm considered fairly tall, but seeing him in the dim light gave me an inexplicable sense of fear. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of black shorts. He looked at me curiously. The man was very fat, with a large, hairy chest covered in tightly curled black hair. His face was pockmarked and darkened, his features seemingly squashed into a lump of dough. His small eyes were barely visible, and his nose was almost non-existent. His appearance reminded me of something familiar. Then it hit me. He looked just like a pug, one of those wrinkly-faced dogs. I stood there awkwardly, almost forgetting why I had come. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then a woman's voice called out from inside the house, likely surprised that the man hadn't spoken for so long. The man finally responded to her and then turned to me, his tone changing. "What brings you here? Wandering outside in such heavy rain?" Despite his intimidating appearance, his voice was surprisingly polite. I quickly explained that I was a passerby caught in the rain and asked if I could take shelter in his house for a while. His face showed suspicion, which was understandable. Who would let a stranger stay in their home? I hurriedly showed him my ID and even offered him some money. His eyes lit up at the sight of the cash, a greedy glint flashing in them. All right. You can stay in the backyard. I'll set up a bed for you. Just for one night," he said, leading me inside. The house was spacious and warm. As we passed through the front room, I noticed a large mixing machine and piles of flour. It seemed the two of them made a living selling noodles. Further inside was the bedroom. On the large bed to the left lay a young woman. I only glanced at her briefly. She was barely dressed, with just a blanket loosely wrapped around her. When she saw me enter, she shrank back into the corner, hurriedly fumbling for her clothes. Embarrassed, I quickly turned away. The walls were yellowed and covered in mold, resembling the skin of someone with liver disease. That day I learned sometimes I was aware of the legend of the seven figures. That day happened to be the first Thursday of August. By then, I had already established at first, there were two streetlights, but eventually I could see even in the distance, I saw a faint light clinging to a sliver of the girl kept scolding me for bringing a stranger into the house without it was merely a small shed covered with straw, roughly a few square inches. Thinking that despite the wholeness of the world, there was still the man, seeing my refusal, muttered something under his breath and walked back inside, disappointed. Soon after, I heard the girl's dissatisfied voice and the man's attempts to placate her. Then came the sound of chewing and the smell of meat. Outside, the rain poured harder, the sound resembling a waterfall. I couldn't sleep but forced myself to close my eyes and rest. I had to continue my journey the next day, so I tried to relax my body. I don't know how long I drifted in and out of sleep, but a sudden clap of thunder jolted me awake. Instinctively, I glanced at my watch. The faint glow of the screen read 10:10 p.m. I turned over, intending to sleep a little longer, but in the haze of half-sleep, I saw a tall figure standing in front of me. Startled, I sat up abruptly. Another flash of lightning illuminated the shed, and in that brief moment, I saw him. The middle-aged man stood before my bed, his face twisted into a demonic expression. Though it was only for a second, I clearly saw the gleaming butcher knife in his hand. I knew what he intended to do, but neither of us moved. I remained seated on the bed while he stood beside me. "If it's money you want, I can give it to you. There's no need to take my life," I said, trying to stay calm. Panic, anger, or fear in such a moment would only get me killed. The man let out a cold laugh. "Money? You think I'll let you go? And then you'll call the cops on me? Do you take me for a fool? If I kill you, the money will be mine anyway. Besides, This isn't my first time doing this. As he spoke, the faint light from the knife glinted menacingly. So, this house of yours is a black inn, I said, immediately rolling into the corner of the shed to put some distance between us. I knew he was stronger than me, and I wouldn't stand a chance in a physical fight. Don't bother dodging. This place is like a big block of tofu. I can cut you down wherever you go. Just accept your fate. Who told you to wander around in the middle of the night? You're like a fat duck falling from the sky. Ha 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 ha. The man began laughing maniacally. His laughter sounded like a death knell, and I thought to myself, am I really going to die here? Suddenly, the light inside the house turned on. The girl, now wearing a floral patterned coat, came out, her hands on her hips. She glanced coldly at the man, then at me. Her gaze was chilling, like the way a butcher looks at pigs and goats waiting to be slaughtered during the new year. Hurry up, we still have work to do. By morning, the delivery boy from the bun shop will be here, and we need to make enough buns for them. Ha, what a convenient delivery of meat, she said with a sinister chuckle. I had initially held out some hope that she might help me, but now I realized there was no chance. I suddenly remembered the rumors about human meat buns. Back then, I thought it was just a joke. Who would have thought that in this day and age, there were still people carrying on Sun Erning's legacy? This one looks a bit arrogant. He's probably a seasoned fighter, the fat man said, spinning the knife in his hand as he looked at me and spoke to the girl. Now, I wasn't just facing the fat man. The girl had pulled out a rolling pin from somewhere and was slowly moving behind me. I couldn't move. If I did, the fat man's knife would come down on me. But if I stayed still, the girl's rolling pin would strike me. Time ticked by, and sweat began to drip from my forehead. Just as the three of us were locked in this tense standoff, a deep rumble of thunder rolled through the air. This thunder was different from before. It was unnervingly low and sent shivers down our spines. All three of us froze, feeling a sudden chill. I saw the girl clutch her coat tightly, her eyes darting around nervously. She moved closer to me. Taking advantage of the fat man's momentary distraction, I lunged toward a corner of the shed. I had been watching that spot for a while. It was the only place where water was seeping in, so it seemed like the easiest way out. Sure enough, I broke through, tumbling onto the ground outside. I rolled several times, scraping my forehead in the process. The heavy rain immediately drenched me. I turned back to look, and sure enough, the fat man and the girl were chasing after me. I scrambled to my feet, ready to run, but as soon as I stood up, I froze. A flash of lightning illuminated the scene, and I saw them, 7 figures standing right in front of me. Raincoats, conical hats, the 7 figures. I was stunned, unable to speak. So the legend was true. Moreover, if the group of 7 truly existed, they couldn't be destroyed. They were the embodiment of humanity's darkest sides, akin to demigods, beyond the reach of any magic or spell. I couldn't see their faces beneath the conical hats, but I could feel the overwhelming aura of death emanating from them. The 2 people behind me had caught up, clearly unaware of the terror the group of 7 represented. "You think you've found someone to help you?" The fat man sneered, panting slightly. He glanced at the figure holding the staff and laughed loudly. "I'll kill these blind fools and use them for meat buns too." With that, he charged forward, knife in hand. The woman seemed to sense something was wrong and tried to pull him back, but his slippery body slipped from her grasp. I darted to the side as the fat man lunged forward. His knife slashed down onto the right shoulder of the leading figure. The fat man grinned triumphantly, but his smile quickly froze. It was as if the expression had been etched onto his face. He had seen the figure's face. What's more, none of the 7, including the one he had struck, reacted at all. They stood there like statues. The fat man tried to pull the knife out, but no matter how hard he tugged, it wouldn't budge. He tried to let go, but the knife seemed fused to his hand. Gluttony, punishment, bloated stomach. The leader's voice was deep and cold, like a stone grinding against another. Then the 7 figures moved in unison, grabbing the fat man's arms, legs, and head. The others pried his mouth open. The fat man screamed for help, his cries like a pig being slaughtered. He turned his desperate gaze toward the woman, but she was too terrified to move. Her once pale face had turned ghostly white. Rainwater dripped from her hair as she stood frozen, one hand clutching her chest, the other covering her mouth, her wide eyes fixed on the fat man. They flipped the fat man over. One of the figures began scooping up dirt from the ground and shoving it into his gaping mouth. The fat man screamed in agony, but he couldn't resist. I stood there paralyzed, watching as they stuffed dirt into him, like force-feeding a duck. His face turned a sickly liver color, and his stomach swelled grotesquely. The fat man's screams echoed across the desolate outskirts, growing weaker and weaker, until they faded into faint whispers. But the 7 figures didn't stop. They continued shoving dirt into his mouth until his body convulsed a few times, and then went still, silent. I stared in horror at the 7 figures. The leader, with the knife still embedded in his shoulder, suddenly began to tremble. His entire body seemed to melt like ice in the rain, vanishing in an instant. What I saw next was beyond belief. The fat man's bloated stomach began to writhe as if something inside was trying to break free. It was like a scene straight out of Alien. With a sound like fabric tearing, his stomach finally split open. A hand emerged from the gash. To call it a hand would be generous. It was more like a skeletal claw. After the hand came a shoulder, then a skull. The entire figure crawled out of the fat man's body, resembling the leader who had just disappeared, except this one was covered in the fat man's blood and entrails, which dripped from its body. I nearly vomited. The rain had stopped, and the moonlight shone down. Under its glow, I could see undigested food from the fat man's stomach, still clinging to the figure's body. The 7 figures stood in a line again, as if nothing had happened. The fat man's corpse lay there, mouth agape and filled with mud. The woman seemed to have gone completely mad, staring blankly at the fat man's lifeless body. I struggled to stand but couldn't move. The 7 figures suddenly turned toward me, forming a line as they walked in my direction. They came closer and closer. When they were just over a person's length away, they stopped and stood still. I knew they were watching me. At that moment, I felt as though my soul had been sucked out of my body. After a while, they began to move again, brushing past me one by one. Their shoulders bumped against mine as they slowly disappeared into the thick darkness. Looking back, it's almost laughable. The fat man had probably killed countless people, but in the end, it was his gluttony that led to his demise. He likely never understood what had killed him. I knew it was over. Not far away, the fat man's corpse lay in a grotesque heap. The woman had lost her mind. I returned to the shed, grabbed my belongings, and called the police before leaving. I thought that was the end of it. But on the first Thursday of August the following year, they appeared again. That year, I had just graduated, and my father had fallen ill. I was in a terrible mood. That night, I went for a walk near my house, smoking a cigarette, completely unaware of how late it had gotten. Just like the year before, a sudden downpour began. Luckily, there was a small pavilion by the road, so I went inside to wait out the rain. That night was much colder than a typical summer evening. I was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt and felt a chill, so I crossed my arms and sat in the pavilion, waiting for the rain to stop. Suddenly, I caught a whiff of cheap, pungent perfume. Disgusted, I turned my head and saw a young woman in her early 20s. She was wearing a tight, low-cut top and a short skirt. Her makeup was heavy, her blonde curls hanging loosely around her shoulders. Despite her youth, the dim light revealed the exhaustion and recklessness beneath her thick makeup. The dark circles under her eyes were visible even under layers of powder. She seemed to notice me, paused for a moment, then smiled and walked toward me. The pavilion wasn't large, and before she even got close, I could barely stand the overwhelming smell. "Hey there, big brother, out here so late. Why don't you spend some time with me? It'll be worth it for both of us," the girl teased, her bright red lipstick standing out as she spoke. It turned out she was a prostitute. I felt a bit annoyed. My father was gravely ill, and even if he weren't, I had no interest in such things. Naturally, I waved her off, turned my face away, and shifted my body toward the edge of the pavilion. But she wasn't willing to give up. She sat right next to me, grabbed my hand, and leaned in closer. "Come on, big brother, just take a look. You can try it out first. I'm still young, you know," she said, then took my hand and placed it on her chest. I was furious. I pulled my hand away and moved to the very edge of the pavilion. The space was narrow and I was worried she'd keep pestering me, so I stood as far away as I could. The rain had grown heavier and the wind lashed against my face. "Fine, if you're not interested, whatever," she said, clearly annoyed. The two of us stood in silence in the pavilion for a while. After some time, I suddenly heard her voice again, cheerful and loud, as if she were talking to me. "Oh, wow, more people are coming over. I don't believe I can't catch at least one of them. Forget you, you idiot." I didn't turn around, assuming it was just more people seeking shelter from the rain. "Hey there, gentlemen. I'm very skilled and my prices are reasonable," she called out, trying to attract customers. Suddenly, I felt an intense chill down my back, an icy coldness that made no sense. If people had entered, why hadn't I noticed anything? I hadn't heard a single sound. I quickly turned around, and there they were. Exactly 1 year later, on the same day, I saw them again. The group of 7 hadn't changed at all. They stood beside the pavilion, staring at the prostitute who was still trying to flirt shamelessly. She had already taken off her clothes, exposing nearly her entire upper body. She seemed confused, perhaps wondering why these people weren't reacting at all. Then one of them stepped forward, grabbed her by the hair and muttered, "Lustful one, punishment, skinning." The girl screamed in terror, crying out in pain as she tried to break free, but it was futile. The others grabbed her limbs, holding her in place. One of them reached out toward her head. I stood there frozen, watching them carry out the punishment. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly powerless and hopeless. The girl looked at me in agony, her eyes pleading. "Help me, please, help me," she cried. But before she could finish, a hand with long, black nails pierced her scalp. Her scream of pain echoed, but it was cut short as another figure drove a bamboo stick through her mouth. Blood sprayed everywhere like a fountain. Her eyes filled with tears, and her legs, pinned down, twitched in despair. But what happened next was even more horrifying. The hand that had pierced her scalp quickly tore open a large hole. Then the other hand joined in, and they began peeling her skin off, like removing a piece of clothing. Her blood-soaked skin was ripped apart and discarded. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I had heard stories about how the Viet Cong used to skin prisoners during the war, but I never imagined I'd witness it myself. And the girl wasn't even dead yet. Stripped of her skin, she suffered for a few more agonizing minutes before finally succumbing. The bloodied skin was tossed to the ground. The figure who had skinned her stood coldly beside her lifeless body. When she stopped moving, he removed his clothes and conical hat. As each piece of clothing came off, his body seemed to dissolve into thin air. By the time he was completely undressed, he had vanished entirely. The remaining figures clasped their hands together in unison. Then the skin girl's body stood up. She put on the discarded clothes and hat, joining the line of 7. The group of 7 stood before me once again. Perhaps I was the only person who had ever seen them and lived to tell the tale. But what about this time? Would it be my turn next? Just like the year before, I didn't even have the courage to run. I knew it would be pointless. I stood there, frozen, in the eerily quiet street. Not a single car passed by. It was just me and them. They stood facing me, close yet impossibly distant. The blood on the ground was a stark reminder that they could tear me apart at any moment if they wished. "Leave," one of them suddenly said. The voice was as cold and mechanical as before, like it came from a machine. I was confused. I wanted to ask why, but the group of 7 had already turned their backs to me and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I felt as though all the strength had drained from my body. Leaning against one of the pavilion's posts, I sat there for a long time before finally returning to the hospital. My father noticed my pale face and asked what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to lie to him, so I told him everything. He was silent for a long time before speaking slowly. "Perhaps they've been following you ever since your first encounter. The group of 7 will continue their journey. Each time they punish someone, one of them is freed. From now on, you should avoid going out at night and focus on bettering yourself. That way, even if you see them again, they won't be able to harm you." After hearing this, I nodded. After Rose finished her story, Lily had already fallen asleep beside her. Perhaps this girl would always remain carefree like that. But maybe it was for the best. Overthinking isn't good for anyone. I took off my jacket and draped it over her. "Do the group of 7 really exist?" I couldn't help but ask. Rose looked at me and nodded. "But it seems that after that time, they were never seen again. and I haven't heard of them appearing anywhere else. She gestured toward Lily beside her. What about her? The hospital has rules about visiting hours and doesn't allow overnight stays. I waved my hand dismissively. It's fine, let her sleep. She's been working a lot lately and is exhausted. You should rest too. I'll wake Lily up later. Rose had no choice but to go to bed. The hospital room fell silent. Outside, the rain continued to pour heavily. I found myself standing by the window, idly gazing out. The darkness outside was impenetrable, and apart from the occasional flash of car headlights, there wasn't even a shadow in sight. Just as I was about to turn away, a streak of lightning tore through the night. It lasted only a moment, but I saw it clearly. In the parking lot below, there were 7 figures. They wore conical hats and black raincoats, walking one after another. What's more, I saw the leader lift his face and look directly in my direction. But before I could make out his features, the outside world was swallowed by darkness once more. I rushed downstairs, but there was nothing there. Was it an illusion? Or was it truly the group of 7 from the legend? Forever wandering in the rain, forever carrying out their punishments. On the first Thursday of August, it's probably best to avoid going out at night. If you love stories about supernatural forces and chilling mysteries, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the MRCat YouTube channel so you won't miss any exciting videos. Your support is the motivation for us to keep bringing even more fascinating content. Thank you so much, everyone.